The very essence of the mental game is this. The only reason an event matters is because we make it matter.
Welcome to the Mullins Farrier podcast, where I will sit down and converse with the superstars, the overachievers, the masters of our craft. Each episode will be a deep dive into their personal philosophies, their habits, the tools they use, and the secrets to not only their success, but overcoming failure as well.
First, find somebody you can mimic, then find somebody you can stand, and then try to focus on one style until you master that style.
So if you say I can't do something, well, you're absolutely right. But if you say you're going to, you're absolutely right with that too.
People say that you shouldn't define yourself by your work. That is not true.
You know what Dave Farley does when he's, lucky enough to be at the World Equestrian Games? I'm watching other people work.
Yeah.
I don't think we do that enough.
This podcast is for all of you out there who share my passion for the job and the desire to always improve. These interviews will put you in touch with the inner workings of the role models we all want to emulate. So let's get to it.
There's only so many hours in a day, and it's a matter of what you do with them.
Today I'm speaking with Sara Vanderpol. I ran into Sara many times over the years at shoeing competitions, clinics, and conventions. Each time, she had a new credential with the AFA, or she had stepped up into the open category, or she had just made the Canadian Farriers team, or she had just come back from working in the UK. On and on, she just kept setting the bar higher for her peers. I was always inspired, and admittedly sometimes jealous of her achievements and her never-ending search for another challenge. She was gracious enough to sit down and do an interview with me a few months ago, and due to a technical error with my recording equipment, half of the conversation was lost. I tried my hardest to salvage the conversation, but in the end I had to ask her for another interview. Sara obliged, and I have to say that I'm glad we got to do it a second time. Because we were both familiar with the questions by that point, we were able to take the conversation down some more fruitful paths and to go deeper on some topics. Sara began her career in 2011 attending Heartland Horseshoeing School. Upon graduating, she apprenticed under Randy Broussard and Mike Smith. Sara built on her skill set through Farrier competitions and has competed across Canada, the USA, England, Scotland, and Ireland. In 2015, she did the Edward Martin Cultural Exchange, where she spent over 4 months in the UK working with 21 different farriers. She was a member of the Canadian Farriers team in 2016 to 17 and 2017 to 18. Sara runs her business out of Elora, Ontario, and shoes dressage, hunters, and pleasure horses. Sara touched on something in the first conversation that stuck in my mind ever since. When I asked her about the differences between shoeing in the UK versus here in North America, one of the major ones she pointed to was our differing approaches to when times get tough or when things go wrong. She said that while we in North America tend to take things personally and ask what we did to deserve such terrible luck, something I'm very guilty of myself, our counterparts in the UK tend to expect that bad stuff is going to happen and take it in stride. It reminded me of the old World War II posters from the UK that have been made popular again that say, "Keep calm and carry on." This is a prime example of Stoicism, a philosophy that was founded in the 3rd century BC. I found many of the high-achieving guests on some of my favorite podcasts have all researched and read several books on this philosophy and found its lessons quite helpful. Seneca and Marcus Aurelius are two of the more popular authors of that time, and I recently read a modern book called The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday that was quite good on the topic too. If you're interested, I will leave some links in the show notes to books on this topic. While I have just dabbled in it myself, I have found many of its lessons to be very helpful in my approach to the hardships of life and running a business in a physically and mentally demanding career. Anyway, this is only one of the many great bits of advice and wisdom that Sara shares in our conversation. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. So I'm sitting here with Sara Vanderpol. Thank you very much, Sara, for agreeing to do this for a second time. The first time we did this interview, the equipment had a bit of a technical malfunction, and I had to convince her to come back and try this all over again. So I would also like to send a special thank you to Wendy for allowing us to use her lovely studio in Fergus, Ontario. So welcome, Sara.
Thank you.
To start off, how did you get your start in this business?
So in 2010, I took an interest in watching our farrier do our horses' feet, which was shortly followed by a high school co-op program that I spent with Kathy L'Esperance. I was with her from February until June, after which point I decided that this was the job for me because it felt like a second nature and like my place in the world.
That's cool. So you decided to go to school. Where did you go and why did you decide to go there?
I went to Chris Gregory's school. I decided to go there after I met Chris at the OFA convention in 2010. I talked to him and he was very knowledgeable on the subject of farrier, very easy to follow, and just well-spoken and seemed very, very good to learn from.
Now, that was my first time meeting him too, and it took me a little while longer to get down there, but he definitely inspired me to head in that direction too. So you had once told me that you were originally quite scared of the fire. How did you overcome that?
I just started out, and once I got to know the components and how it functioned, it became a lot more comfortable to be around it. And just getting burned repeated times, you kind of end up getting used to it. As unfortunate as that is, it's not such a big deal to get burned by a piece of scale.
Yeah, it just happens every day after that.
Pretty much.
Yeah. So once you were finished school, where did you head after that?
After school, I came back to Ontario and was a little bit lost initially, just not knowing who I could ask to work for. So I ended up working for some cold shoeing, just get the shoe on the foot, not necessarily the most refined, no forging stuff. So I continued to forge on my own until I went to the Michigan Horseshoers Association competition. And there I met who I apprenticed with, Randy Brassard and Mike Smith. I met both of them there.
Oh, okay.
And subsequently ended up working for both of them starting that April. So I was there in January and began my apprenticeships for both of them in April.
Oh, cool. You worked with both of those guys for how long?
Still up to pretty much current. I work, if I have time, the odd day. So it's been 7 years now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And with Randy, I know his focus has been quite a bit on the handmaids as well as Mike's. What sort of things did you learn through working with him?
With Randy?
Yeah.
I pretty much owe most of my knowledge to him, both in trimming feet and in making shoes. During the beginning of my apprenticeship, he had to fix pretty much every trim that I did. So I would do what I thought was a good job, and then he would come along and oftentimes take his nippers out and take more off. And then I would be able to pick the foot up after he trimmed it and see. And then for the shoemaking part, I competed pretty much right from the get-go. So I would have shoe lists that I had to practice shoes for, and he would just give me little pieces, one piece at a time. So whether it be how to not have my fullering blow out in the toe or how to do deep seating better, but it was never a lecture on how to forge a shoe. It was just little pieces at a time it was like climbing a ladder. Every piece helped make it better.
Right. I do remember you saying one time that he made you earn everything that he taught you. Could you explain how that worked? The reason I ask this is I think it's a valuable piece of information for people who are just starting out to grasp this concept that you have to earn your way into somebody's shop and what comes of doing that.
I think just being humble going into a situation and knowing that I didn't really deserve anything, that I was lucky to be an apprentice. Just grateful to be there and be able to learn step by step, to never feel entitled to anything and just keep my head down and keep working. Piece by piece, he slowly taught me most of the stuff that I know and never discouraged me from learning.
I just know that you'd said that you owed your career to Randy.
Yeah, it's a combination of both of them, especially the competitive side. I owe a lot to Randy. Mike helped exponentially. He was definitely the one where Randy would show me something, but then Mike would show it to me 10 times and explain it to me 5 different ways to make it make sense.
Right.
So I think the combination of them was very, very good. I think I base most of the work that I do every day off of Randy's style versus Mike's style.
Right.
So I wouldn't say that it's all Randy, but I owe a lot of it to Randy.
And you spent a lot of time with Randy and his family. Even to have you here doing this interview seems like a pretty big step compared to the Sara I first met probably back in 2010. Last time you said that had a lot to do with Randy too? Just that they would take you out to social situations and kind of get you out of your shell?
Yep, they definitely adopted me as their daughter, and they took me to family events. their daughter's Christmas concert. They took me swimming. Just little things like that kind of got me out from the regular day-to-day being at home at the farm, not really getting out a whole bunch other than being out with friends.
Right. So as Randy was a competition shoer, was that how you got into it? What got your start in the competition world?
In 2011, after my shoeing course at Chris Gregory's, his son Cody dragged me out to my first shoeing competition in Nebraska. So I wasn't a big fan or super excited about it in the beginning. I thought it would be terrifying going out and having my barely knowledgeable basic work judged by someone. But once I was out there, I just got fired up by it and realized it was something I wanted to pursue. So that was mostly my initiation that started the competing. And then just it was encouraged a lot by both Mike and Randy in helping me with the forging and the shoeing aspects.
Okay. Were you a competitive person before, or was it just sparked by the shoeing competitions?
It was totally sparked by the shoeing competitions.
It's interesting.
I think maybe slightly competitive, but the competitions became a niche where I found I could excel and was happy to do it.
Right. And then this eventually led you to the Canadian team. How did you get there? What do you think you did differently, or how you approached it differently that got you onto the team compared to the people you were competing against to get that slot?
Extra hours of dedication. Being in the shop till midnight or 1 o'clock a lot of mornings out of the week. So going out and being underneath horses all day and then coming home, grab a quick bite to eat, and out you go. And then just not limiting myself in my ways of thinking that it was too much to be able to do. Just slowly, every step of the way, every day, working towards getting on the team.
What was it that first inspired you to go that direction? Could you point to the moment where you were like, I want to be on the team?
Probably just always looking up to them when I was starting out with competing and knowing that even though it seemed like an exponential dream, that I did want to do that one day, just to experience the teamwork and the detail of work that's involved in competing at that level. And then the opportunity to travel as well.
Right. And where did you get to travel with the team?
We went to Stoneleigh, England, and out to Lexington, Kentucky. And the second year that I was on the team, I flew out west 4 times for team practices. So I got to see the west coast of Canada as well.
Oh, cool. And through that, I imagine you made quite a few relationships or bonds with the people on the team. Is that something that's carried over since?
Oh, they're just like distant family that I talk to sometimes, occasionally.
Okay.
I know that they would always be a text message away.
Yeah.
And that any competition I go to, you do get to know those people much better than most of the other farriers because you do spend a lot of time with them. So it's like a tight-knit family that drifts apart a bit, but you know them well enough that when you see them again, you just click.
Right. Oh, that's pretty cool. Now, what sort of benefits do you think from being on the team you've received and that have like carried over since then?
Confidence in my shoemaking ability and everyday shoeing, just having the basics pretty solid. And then also having repeated shoeing a foot for a competition enough that I can pass that skill along to other people, that I know what they're looking for, where you can gain points for certain judges, and then that you have to vary your work for specific judges.
Right. A lot of strategy in there, I guess.
There is, yeah. It comes down to basic solid work, but in the higher level competition, there's certain things that judges will give you more points for than others.
Okay. Part of the reason I ask that is I'm sure there are people who are competing that probably like you did feel that it's such an exponential distance to cover to get there. And I thought it would be good for them to kind of know what it is they're striving for and what they'll get out of it.
It really is a once in a lifetime opportunity to excel your career in being able to see good horseshoeing and produce good horseshoeing. When I first went onto the team, I kind of could see a foot and kind of could make a shoe to fit that foot, but was not at all fine-tuned. So repeating that process to practice for these competitions and being honed by other top farriers from the country, it's a very good opportunity to excel in those skills, and then to meet other people from around the world and pick little things up from them as well.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. I found the same thing where they call it the Dunning-Kruger Effect, where the less you know about something, the more of an expert you can think you are on it. And then you touch on something, like you go to Heartland or you go to these competitions and you can see what levels people take it to, and all of a sudden you realize there's this whole other universe of stuff that you didn't even realize you needed to know or what to look for. And it's pretty incredible to have that experience, and then it just transfers to your day-to-day, I'm sure. Now, how would you prepare for a competition or even your certifications? Did you have a specific game plan? How many hours of practice would you do?
Game plan, for the most part, is figure out which shoes you're forging. And then I would usually start off, just practice the shoes, no time limit, just work out the fine details of the shoe. So if it's a roadster, work on your blocks and your wedges. If it's deep-seated, work on your deep seating. And once you have those pieces, then bring them together and just repeat the process over and over and over again to the point of almost being sick and tired of making the shoe. It is tough to say how many hours. As many as you can get is ideal.
Yeah.
And then in the days coming up to the competition, I'll tune all my tools and have everything ready. And I like to package them up. So for each class, I have a fresh punch, pritchel, extra pritchel. And then sometimes I'll have an extra punch that floats around between stations. So have all little tool bundles that you know once the class is going, this goes with this for these two shoes. And oftentimes if there's a live shoeing, I was lucky enough that Randy would bring horses into the shop that we could shoe in preparation for that with whichever shoe it needed.
Oh, that's cool.
So we would usually work together, even if it was just an individual class, just each of us just take our time and do a good job trimming the foot, evaluate each other's trim, make shoes, evaluate the shoe, the fit. And then once we're done, evaluate each other's finished job.
Wow. I'm sure you'd learn a lot from that kind of experience.
Yep. And then going into the contest, I'll have all my heat set out in my mind, what to do in each heat, so that as soon as I take the steel out of the fire, I don't have to think about it.
Right.
So just kind of meditating on how the class is going to go before you do the class. And then if something goes wrong, having that backup plan in the back of your head.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. So when something does go wrong, you plan before the event even happens? You try to think of what situations could come up and then prepare for them that way?
Usually, yeah. I think over the years, a lot of classes have gone smoothly, so I don't think about it every time. But usually you just kind of go into beast mode if something goes wrong, just so you do get done.
Yeah.
If you burn a shoe, you have to be able to sacrifice heats and quality of shoe so that you can still get finished.
Right. Yeah, and it's pretty incredible what you can accomplish with just adrenaline.
Yes, indeed.
At that point, yeah.
Yes.
And muscle memory if you've been practicing that much beforehand.
As long as you don't clamp up.
Yes.
Yes.
That seems to be my method of approaching those situations. It works really well for me.
You just clamp up?
Yeah.
In which case you should drink more water. Step back, take a deep breath, and take a drink of water.
Yeah?
It's the key to success.
There you go.
Yep.
You heard it right here.
Yep. Good advice. That was told to me many times because I had a bad habit of holding my breath.
Yeah, that's something I do too.
Mm-hmm.
There are a few people who've really approached the fine tuning of even just hammer swings. Do you really concentrate on breathing in that? Or is it you just have to remind yourself that, wait, I should be breathing here?
You have to make a conscious effort to breathe.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now, how about as far as physical preparedness? Did you ever do any extracurricular physical training for it, workouts or anything like that?
Unfortunately not.
Okay. Hey, it still worked, obviously.
Just repeated practicing of forging the shoes.
Right.
Which my cardio probably could have been a little better.
And did you ever have injuries come up in doing that?
There was one time I did put my shoulder out. I'm not exactly sure how, but it was nothing serious. Just a few trips to the chiropractor, pop it back in, carry on. It was just a very tightened muscle in my hammer shoulder that apparently pulled it out.
Now, that being probably a repetitive stress injury, I do know there was a time way back when you were actually very seriously injured. Was it your leg or your ankle?
My ankle.
What happened there and what kind of lessons did you take from that?
So a horse was cross-tied with nylon chain shanks tied fast, which I did not quite realize until said horse pulled back and pinned me between itself and a wall and then used my ankle as a springboard to jump forward off of as it fought the tide-fast cross ties. So lessons learned while I sat for 6 weeks and could not do anything. Be careful of your work environment. Do not be afraid to ask someone to hold a horse that you don't feel comfortable doing in cross ties. Cross ties, I think, are probably one of the most dangerous things ever invented that we take for granted most horses are pretty good on. But when it goes bad, it goes very bad. And always make sure that there is a breakaway on the cross tie.
Do you find that because of that situation, you're extra vigilant now?
Yes, I'm pretty paranoid.
Something that I find, and a lot of people that I've run into have seemed to describe, is that they're also hesitant to actually ask for what they need in situations like that. Some places, you know, the staff only find you an annoyance more than a help when you're there for the day and taking up their time. But sometimes I wonder if we don't get a little complacent just because we're trying to save those awkward conversations too.
I'm guilty of the exact same thing, but I think at the end of the day, you have to be comfortable with how you work. So it depends if you want to keep working in the barn. You kind of have to read the people and decide, are they willing to help me out? I'm very lucky to work for a lot of horse owners rather than horse barns, where they're there. If the horse needs held, they're standing literally right there. They're just around the corner cleaning tack or something along those lines. So I'm a better vantage point to have help if I need it. I don't know how guys go into big barns and just run through the numbers. I know most horses are pretty good, but just not having that hand there if you need it.
Well, it depends on the barn. A lot of places, I'm pretty fortunate in most of my clients that there's always somebody available to help you out. But like I said, sometimes I feel like we take a risk that maybe we shouldn't. And sometimes it takes an injury like that to kind of show you that it's not worth being polite. You have to be an advocate for yourself.
Exactly. And I think the other thing, someone once said that as soon as a vet shows up, it's all hands on deck. But I think that's because vets aren't there every 6 weeks. Usually if they're there, it's something that needs to be addressed right away. That's not routine. We're there every 6 weeks or 4 weeks. So we'd be like, oh, they're back. And last time it was fine. We did it this way, and just carry on with the normal routine. You're just part of the barn staff.
Yeah,
you're not the vet showing up to do something special.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So eventually your career led you to do the exchange program in England, right?
The Edward Martin Cultural Exchange.
There we go. What was that like? And who did you end up working with when you went over there?
Oh, I should have making a list. It was a life-changing experience. It pretty much took me completely out of my comfort zone and taking me out of anything familiar and normal, which I was a serious introvert beforehand. So going over there kind of took me right out of my shell. I flew from Toronto to Glasgow on an overnight flight, and getting onto that flight, I had no idea who was picking me up at the other end. Never met him. Talked to him on Facebook once, but Jeff turned out to be awesome. So being on the cultural exchange, I learned lots of different techniques of shoeing, specifically wet feet, and seeing shoes that got worn out in 4 weeks. So there were a few places we would go where they would rent horses out to be ridden on the streets of the town. So they would trim them, put new shoes on them, come back in 4 weeks, and he wouldn't trim the horse, but just put new shoes on because there was no shoe left. And then another 4 weeks later, they would get new shoes again and get trimmed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it was quite something to see shoes wear out like that. I'm not used to that here.
No kidding.
There's not very many horses that do that in this area.
No.
So then just to see the different lifestyles over there, to be part of the culture of the UK, and to be able to see different tourist destinations, different ways of life, to go pretty much from the southern part of Scotland to just south of London. I worked for 21 different farriers while I was there, staying at 12 different spots, and the list of names is almost too long to mention.
It's okay. That's incredible. Are there any standout situations?
Most of them.
Okay.
There were a few moments that mostly just seeing difficult situations that different families have gone through and how they could still survive through those and be so happy to have a guest in their house, even shortly after much tragedy has struck their families, was quite something.
I actually remember in the first interview, I asked you if there were any major differences that you noticed between there and here. And the one that you had mentioned is just the attitude when it comes to when things go wrong or things go badly. Could you describe that a little bit more?
They don't get caught up in the drama so much. I think that European people are a little bit tougher than Canadians. Not that everyone wants to hear that, but they just kind of take everything in stride. I think they're just raised differently than us. They're usually out of the house by 18. They're done high school at 16. They're outgoing, just the lifestyle that they grow up with in the small towns that most of them are raised in. And the work ethic of farriers over there is something to be looked up to.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Now, in what way? There's not much time off, or that they work full days?
They work full days and they do a pile of horses in those days. They're so efficient at fitting shoes. A lot of the people that I worked with would already have shoes boxed and pretty much ready to nail on. They just have to give each shoe a few taps, burn it on, nail it on.
So they kind of knew what the horses already looked like, or what the feet looked like, and had them pre-shaped?
Most of them started off as keg shoes, but they were so efficient in their shaping that 6 hammer blows and the shoe was ready to go on, like a Chris Gregory.
Right.
Turning a front into a hind, just that they knew exactly where to hit. They knew how to trim their feet to make shoes go on. Not that they were manipulating them, but just the efficiency behind all of it.
Right. That's interesting. In the conversation we had before about if things go wrong, they just kind of expect it and don't take it personally. You had said something about how just they will work through any kind of weather.
Oh yeah, thunderstorm, no problem. At least the young guy that I worked with, I don't know if an older farrier might put up a little bit of a fuss.
Right.
But yeah, carry on. If it's raining, your tools might get a bit rusty. You might get a bit wet. It's disgusting to sit back down in a car after you finish that, but
but it's all part of it.
It's all part of it. That's perfectly normal.
Now, do you think that efficiency that you saw over there had a lot to do with the education program that they have to go through in order to become a farrier in that country?
Yes, I think it's expected of them right from the get-go. The apprentices are put under, if they're good apprentices, they're put under plenty of horses. And oftentimes I would work with a second-year apprentice, and they would just go out and shoe horses alongside their boss, go off and trim however many needed to be done. You were pretty much a full-on farrier unless there was any problems, in which case the boss would be there to look upon it. But they were treated like mature farriers, not just given bits and pieces.
Right. That's interesting. Now, do you think that a program like that, I know there's been a debate here, and maybe I'm putting you on the spot, that there should be a program where we have to go through a specific education or pass a certain level of certification to become a farrier? You believe in that?
I think that would be wonderful because it would, I think, slightly restore the horse population's faith in farriers and give them a bit more security in their decision as to what farrier they use. A lot of people are not educated on our certification system in North America. They have no idea what a certified journeyman farrier is, what that test entails. So I think to have that be made standard would be a good deal for the population. It would weed out the underdogs a little bit, the ones that don't want to progress their skills, the ones that go around, take a shoe out of a box and put it on the foot, sometimes to the detriment of the horse. I think if that could get weeded out, that would be very, very nice. At the same time, there are some financial burdens involved in that.
In the certification process.
Well, especially if you go over to the UK, they have to renew their license. I don't know how often, but it is quite pricey to maintain a license to practice farriery. So I think whichever system they use to standardize, there's going to be someone who would like a small cut of that.
Of course.
To overlook. So it would be interesting to see how that aspect would work out. But if someone would want to take the reins on that, that would be awesome.
You'd be all for it.
I would. I wouldn't want to do it, but I'd be all for it.
Now, this leads quite well into the fact that I know that you're now going through to be a tester, right, for the AFA?
That's
or you,
correct.
Are you one officially?
I am not officially one yet. I did my first provisional testing at the end of April, so my very first time marking certified farrier test. So I have to do 3 provisional testing events, and then if I become approved, so by the examiner of the certification each time, then I'll be a full-on tester.
That's amazing. Now, why do you feel that that's important?
I think it's not necessarily the most rewarding thing to do, but it's my way of paying back to the AFA for letting me do the cultural exchange and then passing on the knowledge that I have from the farriers I've worked with.
That's pretty admirable. Good for you. So I know that fairly recently, maybe a couple of years ago, you didn't attempt to go on the team again and you were focused more on your business.
Yep, 2018.
2018?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
A little more recent than I thought. How has that gone? What sort of lessons have you already learned being in the trenches?
That you need a very good work ethic to keep up the pace every day, to take each challenge as an opportunity to learn. So whether it be a negative experience or a positive experience, to not look at it in a bad way and to take little pieces of learning out of that.
Yeah.
And then just being accountable for everything that I do. So if a horse needs to be done, if a text needs to be answered, if a phone needs to be answered, then try to be there for the clients and to keep that path of communication open with them, to answer any questions that they might have and to always be there if they have any further questions. I tell a lot of my clients, I'm not just shoeing your horse for today, I'm shoeing him for 6 weeks. So if you have any questions during the course of that 6 weeks, or if anything goes not right during the course of that 6 weeks, I'm here for you.
Right. So service is really important to you.
Yes.
Now, how do you maintain boundaries? Because there are always clients that are going to take advantage of that openness and maybe text you at 10 o'clock at night or situations like that. I don't know if that's happened to you.
It probably has. 11 o'clock at night and I'll answer, depending on the client.
Yeah.
There's been a few times where I've been that dedicated that I've answered, but that I do turn my phone onto airplane mode. Usually once I go to bed, and it does not get turned on until I wake up again.
Okay.
And I try to keep my answering text hours between approximately 8 a.m. to 9 p.m.
Yeah.
But if the text message has something to do with the horse being unsound, then I will probably answer
sooner. Or
out of business hours.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. You also maintain a single day of the week that you keep off. And why do you feel that's important?
I am a Christian, so that is important according to my religion. I don't work on Sundays. And then also for mental health, it just turns out that I do need that one day to kind of regroup, refocus, refresh, and just take a bit of a breather, spend time with the things that are important in life, family, friends, and just realize that's why I do what I do. I love my job. At the same time, that's what keeps me going.
Yeah.
Is those relationships.
For sure. So even with that schedule, because you're working 6 days a week, which is probably beyond what the average Canadian does during a work week, how do you avoid burnout? Have you ever experienced it?
Oh, big time.
I couldn't imagine those times when you were shoeing all day and then practicing at night. Imagine it would come up at some point.
It did. I think I was not burnt out to the point where I would have a mental breakdown. So I was just able to kind of keep going past it. But then by the time I did my last contest on the team in 2018, I was ready for a reprieve from the last 3 years of chaos.
Right.
It was very enjoyable, but there comes a certain point where it has to be self-discipline too, that you have to go out and do that. And especially being on a team, there's other people that are counting on you to do that.
Yeah. And do you think that actually helped kind of push the burnout away? Just the fact that you needed to be reliable to those people.
Yes. And that they were messaging me, how's it going? Send pictures back and forth. There was that communication that you kind of needed to do stuff. Otherwise they'd be like, hey, what are you doing? Did you go out tonight? We're counting on you. I missed a friend's wedding because I was practicing. Okay, fine.
Totally held accountable.
Yep.
Now that you're on your own, do you have ways of avoiding it other than that one day off a week?
For now, my strategy is to take up a few hobbies and do something other than make shoes and shoe horses. Most of the shoes I'm making now are to go on horses, which I do enjoy a lot more than just making practice shoes that will sit on the shop floor and then get scrapped. So there is that enthusiasm behind wanting to help the horse and do the best job I can for the horse while I think about the horse that is going on while I'm making the shoes for that horse. And then, the biggest thing right now is just finding things other than horsey stuff. So I'd like to take up kayaking and road biking and gardening.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah, that's my plan.
Yeah. And how's that going?
So far, I've started on the gardening and currently looking for a kayak.
Good for you. Now, there isn't a feeling as good as putting a handmade shoe on a foot, is there? I can completely agree with you about you make all those shoes and they sit on the floor that you won't ever get to put them on. But there's some really strong sense of gratification of putting something you made on a foot.
Brings a tear to my eye.
Yeah. In your day-to-day practice, do you use handmaids exclusively, or do you use some cake shoes?
I think right now probably about 85% of my horses are wearing handmaids. And that has to do with the number of horses I shoe. I do a lot more trimming than shoeing, so that allows me to make most of my shoes. I have the time, and it's not that I'm making hundreds of pairs of shoes to go on.
Right. And what material do you usually use?
Steel.
Well, sorry. Are most of the shoes concave, or do you do 3/4 fullards?
I think that's probably mostly 3/4 fullards, 2/3 3/4 fullards, and 1/3 concave.
Okay. And does it just depend on what they're being used for? The
Yep.
surface they're on?
Most of the time, the horse's job. So if they're doing a lot of flat work with a little bit of small jumps, concave seems to be a good answer, especially for the hunters. It's lighter for the stock thickness, so it keeps the feet strong. You can get a few resets out of it, but it's not that they're going to be walking around like a saddlebred.
Right.
And then the majority of the horses I have 3/4 fullard is what I put on because that's what people are used to.
Okay.
The majority of horses that come to me already have those, so I keep those.
Keep that consistency. Now, what advice would you have for somebody who is just starting out their career?
Find a good farrier to apprentice for. Stay humble, keep your head down and work hard. Don't think that you've earned anything. Go out, do clinics, do competitions, travel as much as you can. If you have an opportunity to do the cultural exchange, I highly recommend doing so. It will probably change your life. And then just don't limit yourself in any of your goals or aspirations, whether it be shoeing the nice show horses or competing internationally. Just go for it.
That's good. How would somebody get in contact with someone for that cultural exchange? Where should they look?
You will contact Travis Vern Powell. He's on Facebook. I don't know what his number is, but he's the head of the cultural exchange in North America.
Okay. We'll put that in the show notes afterwards so that they can access it from the website.
Awesome.
Yeah. Now, I know you're not there. Well, yeah, you've been in this at least 10 years. How many years have you been shoeing for?
I've been shoeing for 8 years.
Okay. What advice would you give somebody that is starting to feel a little stale, that has been working for a while and just needs to change something to put that spark back in them?
Probably if you have an opportunity to go to a clinic or work for another farrier, take a day or two and do something, interact with other farriers just to kind of feed off of their energy. Oftentimes, if I go to a competition or a clinic, I come back greatly enthused. Or if you're really burnt out, take a vacation. Just regroup. The only other thing that I can think of is take one aspect of the job that you feel you're lacking in and really focus on improving that day to day. Just so you kind of have a mini goal that you're working towards, and then every day kind of pick that to work on and see if you can improve and focus on improving instead of just going through the numbers.
Right. Oh, that's great advice. Well, thank you very much. We'll move on to the stratum tectorium portion of it.
Oh, boy.
Your favorite. This portion of the podcast is called the stratum tectorium. These are the short answer, surface stuff questions, but it's okay if the guest wants to go deeper. The stratum tectorium is the outermost layer of the hoof wall. The thin layer of cells, also known as the hoof varnish or the stratum externum. Maybe you just learned a new word. I hope you learned some interesting facts about our guest too. Enjoy. All right, here we go. Your favorite book, most gifted to others.
Most gifted to others?
Yeah, do you ever give books to other people?
I don't really, I'm not a huge reader, so I would probably pick Gregory's textbook of Farrier.
Well, that's a good one.
It is a good one. I wouldn't gift it to others, though.
I actually have.
Oh,
Your favorite brand of work boots.
Wolverines.
Your favorite make of rasp.
A Heller XL Legend, the lime green one.
And why?
For getting feet level, it has a wider width than regular feet, so you can plane a foot better because you're not working with a narrow rasp that can make all kinds of wiggles in your foot. And then just the number of teeth you can, I think every rasp stroke removes more than it would with the standard rasp.
That makes sense. What is your dream Farrier rig?
A Stonewell full body.
Now, you wouldn't know this, but in the original interview, your answer was different. Why did it change?
So I thought my contractor cap with a bay horse insert was wonderful until we changed from snow to rain and everything leaks. So I reached to get shoes out of my forger to pull something out of my drawer and get an absolute torrent.
Well, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I can see why you'd change. Your favorite rounding hammer?
A Derek Gardner 2¼ pound hammer with a Gamma tennis wrap on it.
Now, why the wrap?
It allows the hammer to sit in my hand rather than having to grip. You could almost pull the hammer out from between my fingers on the upswing of a hammer swing just because it just sits there. I don't have to put any effort into holding it.
I'm going to look those up. Now, when you're fashioning a hammer handle, typically you want it so that it just fits so that your fingers can touch your palm, right? Roughly. When you add the wrap to it, do you find that the wrap makes it wider or do you thin out the handle to compensate for that?
Meet somewhere in the middle, so I thin out the handle a little bit more than normal. My definition of normal is probably totally off.
Okay.
Yeah, I think probably a little bit wider than what would be a typical hammer handle width.
Okay. Your favorite type of bar stock to work with?
3/8 by 1.
Gas or diesel truck?
Yes. Diesel's too loud.
Favorite pastime after work?
Sleep.
What's the next thing on your bucket list?
I have not thought that far ahead. Probably find enjoyment in other things in life. That's pretty general, but I would like to maybe do a bit of a cycle, like a long distance cycle ride, road bike ride.
Oh, cool.
Join a little group, be one of those cyclists that gets in the way of everyone on the road. Yeah.
I'll be sure to honk at you.
Oh, great.
What's your favorite brand of keg shoe?
Kurghart DS. DS.
DF.
DF. A Kurghart DF.
Leather or synthetic pads?
Leather because it breathes better and it becomes a protein on protein bond, which is healthier for the foot.
I haven't heard that before.
I heard it on Facebook and really liked it.
Really?
Yeah.
That does sound cool. Favorite type of horse to work on?
A good one.
Seems to be everybody's answer.
Yep.
Ideal number of horses to shoe all around in one day?
Gonna make me sound really lazy, but 4.
That would be mine
3
too.
or 4.
Yeah. Favorite anvil?
A Round Horn Legend 120 pound.
Do you have a favorite inspirational quote?
No.
What brand of accounting software do you use, or do you use accounting software?
A blue columnar book written in by pencil.
There we go. App that has most improved your work life, if you've used one.
Text message.
Preferred social media platform?
Facebook.
What brand of phone do you use?
An iPhone 5S.
Do you have injury insurance?
No.
Are you going to get some?
Probably.
Okay. What do you use as your planner or agenda?
I have a day planner. It is a weekly planner, so you have the whole week spread out on 2 pages. Time slots starting at 7 a.m., ending at 9 p.m. So I'll just fill in little slots where each client fits and plan my days out accordingly.
So you're more of a pen to paper kind of person.
Yes, it's much more reliable than software.
I would agree. Favorite method of soothing aches and pains?
Yoga.
Favorite brand of jeans?
Silvers.
Favorite drink?
Summersby strawberry and kiwi cider.
Your favorite genre of music?
Probably somewhere between heavy metal and rock, depending on the day. Can also be classical or pop.
Cool. Do you work out?
Just yoga for now. I would love to do some sort of cardio stuff, but have not ventured into that.
Well, I'm sure you'll get lots of cardio on your bike.
Yep.
Do you meditate?
In the truck while I drive, not specifically intentionally sitting and meditating.
Okay. And what would you have been if not a farrier?
A vet, most likely.
Well, thank you very much, Sarah.
Thank you, Brian. That
Really
was
appreciate it.
wonderful.
Before we finish, I would like to say a few words about the often unsung heroes of our horse world, the grooms. A good groom can make your day, have your back, and even save your life. Notoriously overworked and underpaid, and yet the good ones make sure that the horses are clean but their legs aren't wet, that the ones you need are in, that you know all of the details of the one that might be a bit off. that you're aware of the nervous and quite possibly dangerous one. They coordinate the dates, make sure the stiff ones get out for some pasture time before you work on them. They hold the finicky ones, they take away the ones you've finished, and bring you your next contestant on the shoes fit right. And they may not always appreciate, but they always do tolerate your bad dad jokes. There are many accounts on my books that wouldn't be doable without the hard work of these super grooms that I speak of. I try to show my appreciation by sometimes bringing cookies or coffee, but I've often wanted to find another way to say thank you. Along came the grooms class endeavor by one of our local vet clinics, McKee Pownell. I was approached last year by one of its coordinators, Molly, to sponsor it, so I donated some new farrier tools that would come in handy for those times when a horse pulls its shoe but doesn't quite finish the job. A pair of crease nail pullers and a pair of pull-offs can get any good groom out of the shoe is held on by 3 nails and the horse is stepping on the clip situation. Molly approached me again this year, and they are making the prize list even bigger for the grooms classes. The Hunter one will be during the Autumn Classic Series at EMG in Palgrave, Ontario on the 14th of September. The Jumper one will be during the Canadian Show Jumping Tournament, also at Palgrave, on the 20th of September. The Mullins Farrier podcast is proudly sponsoring these classes to say thank you to our allies in the trenches. As a farrier, maybe you could start a similar initiative in your area, or just bring a box of cookies every once in a while to say thank you for doing what you do. That marks the end of this episode. Thank you for listening. This podcast is made possible by the hard and tedious work of my friends at Twisted Spur Media, and I am forever grateful to them for all that they do. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other out there.